Napoleon Bonaparte did not conquer Europe with steel alone. He did it with signatures, seal wax, and balance sheets. Behind the thunder of artillery was a quieter machinery: treasury officials, notaries, bankers, and clerks moving numbers the way generals moved regiments. The image we're sold is the battlefield genius, the improbable victories, the daring marches, but that's not the whole truth. The empire rose because Napoleon rewired France's money. He understood what most rulers before him did not. A state can outfight its enemies for a season, but it can only outlast them if it outfinances them. And that is the story you were never taught: how a young Corsican, inheriting a ruined treasury after a revolution, rebuilt a financial system strong enough to fuel 15 years of war, law, and modernization. France at the end of the 18th century was a wreck in elegant clothing. The monarchy had fallen under its own debts. For decades, kings borrowed to fund wars and court luxuries, leaning on a tax system that exempted the richest orders and squeezed the poor. When the revolution detonated in 1789, it toppled the political structure but not the arithmetic. The new regime tried an emergency fix: paper notes called assignats, supposedly backed by confiscated church lands. At first, it felt like magic liquidity without pain until it turned into inflation without brakes. By the mid-90s of that century, prices were exploding, confidence was imploding, and everyday trade was choking on distrust. Armies marched in wooden shoes. Creditors demanded metal, not promises. France had political vision, but no monetary spine. Napoleon walks into this chaos in 1799 as first consul. He is 29. A soldier by training and a systems thinker by instinct. He sees what must come first: credibility. Before you can command an army, you must command a currency. So he does something radical for a nation still hot from revolution. He creates a bank, not the old courtier's fountain of privilege, but a hybrid machine built to serve the state's stability and the economy's oxygen. In 1800, he charters the Banque de France. Private investors put up capital. The state grants privileges and direction. That mix is deliberate. Purely public money risked returning to politicized printing. Purely private finance risked another captured oligarchy. The new bank would discount commercial bills, stabilize payments, and crucially begin issuing banknotes in Paris under strict limits. The message to merchants and workers was simple: your money will clear and your wages will spend. Confidence needs anchors, not speeches. Napoleon provides two. First, he rebuilds the treasury into a professional organism. He elevates a quiet genius, Nicolas François Mallien, to manage the public purse with a discipline France hadn't seen in generations. Cash flows are centralized. Arrears are cataloged and cut. The state stops improvising and starts accounting. Second, he gives France a new money with a measurable soul. In 1803, the franc germinal is defined against fixed weights of silver and gold. After years of paper mirages, the unit of account is again a unit of reality. This wasn't financial fashion, it was a social contract. The baker, the soldier, the supplier all needed to believe tomorrow's coin would mean the same thing it meant today. The franc germinal did that. But money is only as strong as the taxes that stand behind it. Napoleon knows the Bourbon system of farming taxes to private collectors bred corruption and resentment. He kills it. The state will collect its own revenues. 4 pillars are tightened and enforced: the land contribution, the personal and movable levy, the patent on professions, and a set of excises later grouped as the reunited duties. Inspectors carry notebooks, not bribe bags. Cadaster's detailed land registers are expanded so assessments rest on measured acres, not negotiated influence. In 1807, he creates a supreme audit court to track the flow of public money with the same rigor he demands on campaign. Audit, in his model, is not an afterthought. It is the nervous system of trust. With the fiscal floor rebuilt, Napoleon turns to the thing that will define his age: financing continuous war without recreating the monarchy's ruin. Here is where he is most modern. He treats war like a cash-flowing enterprise. Victorious campaigns are not just strategic wins, they are revenue events. Indemnities are levied on defeated states. Requisitions of grain, horses, uniforms, and metals are priced and booked. Occupied territories are told to provision the very troops who occupy them. The treasury at home is spared the worst spikes because the front pays the front. When Prussia is broken after Jena in 1806, Contributions pour in. After the treaties of Tilsit in 1807, more money flows from the vanquished. The empire becomes a self-funding machine, so long as it keeps winning. He multiplies the channels. In 1803, he sells Louisiana to the United States for $15 million cash and bonds, preferring money in hand and British denial to dreams of a Western colony he could not defend. He turns conquered administrative chaos into taxable order. The code is imposed, customs restored, and local treasuries put on schedules. He even imagines credit for enterprise, coaxing municipal savings banks and departmental discount houses into existence so commerce can breathe while armies march. The empire's economy is not an afterthought, it is the second front. But every system has a stress test. For Napoleon, it is the water, the one thing he cannot command. He tries to strangle Britain with the continental system, a vast economic blockade designed in 1806 to close European ports to British goods. On paper, it is strategic finance: deny the enemy trade revenues, starve his credit, break his will without a shot. In practice, it is the place where policy meets human incentive and loses. Smuggling becomes an industry. Neutral flags become masks. Coastal towns collude to live. The blockade bleeds his allies and fuels resentment while Britain adapts, rerouting commerce and innovating finance to ride out the storm. Harbors that once hummed go silent. Prices bend in the wrong places. A weapon meant to suffocate the enemy begins to bruise the friends that he adjusts by tightening internal control. More customs men, more seizures, more fines. This is the first lesson for every modern leader who admires Napoleon's administrative brilliance. Coercion can extend policy. It cannot replace economics. A continent will not remain poor on purpose indefinitely. Markets find cracks. The state spends treasure plugging them. The more energy you pour into prevention, the more brittle the system becomes. Napoleon learns this in invoices long before he admits it in proclamations. For a time, victories paper over the strain. Austerlitz pays for a year. Wagram buys another. But the arithmetic is turning. The moment of truth comes with the snow. The Russian campaign in 1812 is not just a military catastrophe, it is a balance sheet killer. The lost men are not just uniforms and muskets, they are the Republic's most expensive line item: trained human capital. Carcasses of horses in the drifts are not just tragedy, they are the collapse of mobility the Treasury has been feeding for a decade. Supplies pre-positioned at cost are torched on retreat. The contribution model flips overnight. Instead of the front paying the front, the center must drain itself to rebuild what the ice destroyed. Creditors who once raced to roll notes now hesitate. Even the best administered treasury cannot fund a war that eats faster than any tax code can feed. And yet, and this is essential, the edifice he built does not vanish with him. When Paris falls in 1814 and the emperor is sent away, the bank remains. The franc germinal stands. The audit court keeps counting. The tax collectors keep walking their routes. France has been given a financial spine. That is Napoleon's deeper legacy and the reason we still live with his shadow. He did not merely seize Europe, he standardized a nation. He proved that law, money, and administration could be fused into a durable engine of state that outlasted the man who assembled it. The deeper you look, the more his era reads like a manual for the modern age. A central bank with private shareholders and public aims. A stable currency tied, in its founding, to metal weights people could trust. A tax system designed to be broad, knowable, and internally collected. A treasury run by professionals, not patrons. And a sober recognition that war, no matter how brilliantly executed, is a financial business that can bankrupt even the strong if it is not matched by peace that pays. The empire is extraordinary precisely because it is ordinary in its components. There is no magic in stability, only structure, enforcement, and incentives aligned with reality. But if you stop the story here, you miss the warning baked into the triumph. Systems built on constant external revenue indemnities, requisitions, plunder, or today's easier cousin, rolling deficits justified by growth share the same hidden risk. They condition the state to need what victory or momentum provides. They build fixed costs that feel normal: bigger armies, larger bureaucracies, thicker roads, grander programs. Then comes the shock, the winter, the war, the recession, the crisis, and the state discovers that the cash engine beneath the pageantry cannot sustain the load. That is when governments reach for tools that look modern but rhyme with the past: aggressive money creation, emergency borrowing, and the quiet hope that confidence will do the rest. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Economic history is the ledger of those choices. Consider what Napoleon got right that outlived him. Start with the money itself. The franc germinal's restraint defined against weights of silver and gold was not ideological, it was psychological. After the hallucinatory years of paper that died in people's hands, France needed an anchor beyond politics. When your unit of account is measured in something tangible, contracts stabilize, wages mean something, and the state's promises feel real. That credibility lowered borrowing costs. Investors will lend at tolerable rates when they believe the repayment will arrive in a currency that still buys bread. That single design choice lubricated everything from road building to grain trade. Next, the administrative nervous system. The decision to collect taxes directly stretched beyond revenue. It created a map of the country's productive reality. Cadastres taught the state where the farms were, how large, and who owned them. Audits taught the state who paid and who did not. That knowledge was power, and not only for extraction. It allowed targeted investment. Canals where commerce begged for water, ports where customs could multiply, schools where future clerks and engineers could be made. Money is not just numbers, it is information. Napoleon's France learned to record it, not guess it. Then law. The Napoleonic Code is usually taught as a legal milestone, not a financial one, but property rights, contracts, and inheritance rules are the oxygen of credit. When merchants know how disputes will be judged, and heirs know how estates will be divided, lenders know how collateral can be realized. Courtrooms are cash flow machines when they produce predictable outcomes. The emperor's legal standardization reduced the friction that had kept regional markets provincial. A Lyonnais bill of exchange became intelligible in Antwerp. That is finance disguised as jurisprudence. But even as he hardened France's financial bones, Napoleon built fragilities that every modern nation recognizes in its own mirror. The continental system is the first. Trying to embargo the greatest maritime trader of the age without mastery of the sea forced him to rely on coercion, not competitive advantage. That it punished his own port economies, pushed trade into the shadows, and subsidized corruption. The more he squeezed, the more valuable the smuggler's skills became. Economic war leans on enforcement. Commerce leans on consent. When policy tries to replace the latter with the former, the ledger bleeds in ways budgets never predict. The second fragility was strategic finance's addiction to momentum. Victories functioned as forward funding that conditioned planning assumptions in ministries, not just in mess tents, to the expectation of tomorrow's contribution. When that revenue stopped, it did not just dent pride, it cracked the cash cycle. The Russian campaign's aftermath revealed a treasury superbly organized for normal strain and superbly exposed to extraordinary shocks. Napoleon's genius could compel men to march. It could not compel the arithmetic to forgive. Now bring the camera to the present, because this is not a museum piece. The outlines of Napoleon's financial state are today's default operating system. Every major nation runs with a central bank that mixes public aims with private channels. Every serious economy understands that currency credibility is the silent determinant of borrowing costs, growth, and geopolitical reach. Every finance minister knows that competent tax administration, credible audits, and predictable property law do more for investment than slogans. And every government tempted by endless stimulus or forever wars runs into the same wall. Math, patience, and trust have limits. Modern leaders have tools Napoleon lacked, from fiat currencies unbound to metal to instantaneous debt markets that can soak up trillions. Those tools can stabilize shocks that would have flattened 19th century states. But they invite a different temptation: to treat the extraordinary as normal. Emergency money creation becomes routine. Deficits become permanent investments. Security commitments metastasize. The state grows into a structure that assumes tomorrow's victory or tomorrow's growth will fund today's promises. And when it doesn't, the quiet machinery we admire in Napoleon's France begins to make a different sound, not the hum of order, but the hiss of pressure. So what should you, the viewer, carry away beyond the history? First, that financial education is not a hobby, it is citizenship. If you understand how currency credibility lowers borrowing costs, you can read central bank announcements and hear consequences, not just words. If you understand how tax administration maps an economy, you can spot when reform is code for opacity. If you understand how law is the skeleton of credit, you can see why sudden rule changes scare capital away. Economic history is not about dusty dates. It is a manual for recognizing power where it sits, how it moves, and who pays when it shifts. Second, that real wealth is more than rising charts. Napoleon's story shows that durable prosperity came from structure. Money people trusted, taxes people understood, courts people believed, and accounts people could audit. Those ingredients outlived the parades, the illusions, the paper miracles of the revolutionary years, the fantasy that a continent would stay poorer to obey a blockade, the belief that victory was a permanent revenue stream, all cracked under stress. Your life is smaller than a state, but the principle scales. Build your finances on cash flows you control, skills that hold demand, and assets that make sense under tighter money, not just looser. Speculation fills feasts, structure fills winters. Third, that money and power remain married. Napoleon grasped that coins and cannonballs serve the same master, policy. When the financial system serves the plan can move mountains. When the plan ignores the financial system's limits, the mountain slides back. Look around. Sanctions turn banking rails into battlefields. Interest rate moves decide which nations breathe and which gasp. Currency credibility, once lost, is not restored by decree. The rulers who remember this stay. The ones who forget are remembered as warnings. If there is a final image worth keeping, it is this: a ledger lying open beside a map. Napoleon spent his life with both. When the columns and the contours matched, he was unstoppable. When the lines on parchment overruled the lines in the books, defeat was already marching. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it'll crush you all the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.